Hi there, you're listening to Arcsoncompod, the Archie Sonic comic podcast. I'm your host Nathan, and together we'll be experiencing the highs, the lows and the downright weirds of the Archie Sonic the Comic series. Today we'll be covering issue 8 of the series, and as usual we'll begin by taking a look at the cover. This week's cover has a plain background that's a kind of burnished orange, which is an odd choice but not necessarily a bad one. I can't imagine many comics on the shelf choosing that colour scheme, so if nothing else it'll definitely stand out. We have the title of Sonic the Hedgehog, with extra text telling us he leaves the competition in the dust. To illustrate that point, Sonic is speeding past in the foreground, and in his wake we see a huge cloud of dust with a few flailing limbs sticking out, all of which are clearly other well-known heroes. We see Spider-Man's hand reaching out and shooting a web. We can see Ghost Rider's flaming skull at one end, with his chain flailing out the other end of the dust cloud. There are a couple of arms here, belonging to Wolverine with his claws, the Punisher holding a gun, and Batman holding a batarang. And we can see Captain America's leg and his shield in separate spots. It's interesting that they're mostly Marvel comic characters here, with the exception of Batman, but it may seem to be the way the competition was leading at the time. I'm also surprised they got away with some very obvious, recognisable characters here. I guess it's technically parodies, so they'd be allowed, I suppose, but seeing them in the background of the Villain Triumphs mini-story was a couple of issues ago, and that's very different to seeing them on the cover here. We're also not done with the references either, as in a tiny panel in the corner, just below the price, Tails is looking surprised as a baseball flies at him from behind, and someone off panel yells, "Duck, Tails!" which I think is a reference to the Disney show, though I could be wrong on that. All in all, a cover with a lot of references though, and very little hint of what we're getting into this week. So I suppose the only way to find out is to crack the comic open and find out for ourselves. Our first story this week is Bots All, folks. And, as we so often do, we begin in Robotropolis with Robotnik. A SWAT bot has marched into the office with Crabmeat in one hand and some comic books in the other. It looks like Crabmeat's in trouble, because he's been caught in possession of some Sonic the Hedgehog comics. The SWAT bot reports as much to Robotnik, and we're straight into the insulting titles this week, as he calls him "Old Flabby Leader." Meanwhile, Crabmeat is looking panicked and yelling at the SWAT bot not to bend his collector's items, so I suppose if he wanted to deny ownership and save his hide, that ship's probably sailed by now. Robotnik bellows a "What?" in response, and was clearly in the middle of some important business judging by the chart he's been reading over in his hand showing the pollution index. It all seems to be going in his favour too, as both lead levels and acid rain are steadily and regularly increasing. Robotnik snaps at Crabmeat for having broken one of Robotnik's rules, specifically the rule about no reading. He points it out on his poster of rules and, oh hey, we've seen this list before. The editor's note confirms it too. You can see the full list in issue 3. And if you missed it and want a full rundown of the rules, you can also check out episode 3 of this podcast where I did list them off. Robotnik has a set punishment for behaviour like this, and in the background we can see the SWAT bot chuckling to himself, because he just loves watching other bots get punished. The punishment, we discover, is being sent to the spare parts separator. Crabmeat tries to explain himself before it's too late. He was reading the comics to try and help the Doctor, though the SWAT bot is quick to chime in that he doesn't believe a word of it. Crabmeat explains he thought they might be able to make some superpowered robots to defeat the freedom fighters, presumably by using the comics to study them. It's a sensible idea really, and even Robotnik seems quite keen on the approach. The SWAT bot is eager to see the punishment go ahead, however, giggling to himself that he can't wait to see Crabmeat dropped into the chopper. Of course, robots like the ones in his idea would require a lot of spare parts, Robotnik realises, and Crabmeat alone won't be enough. So he grabs the SWAT bot and crams him into the part separator too, with crunching, grinding and mashing. Well, you can't say he didn't deserve it with how he treated his fellow bots. I do wonder if that was Crabmeat from the first few issues though. Is that the last we've seen of him? I guess we'll find out. We skip forward to a few days later, where Robotnik is being filmed at the site of a decimated forest. A large sign nearby reads, "On this site will be built an inefficient, unlicensed, outdated, toxic dumping pond," which is signed by Robo Inc., which I think is another new company name. I assume Robotnik's changing company name regularly to dodge taxes or something. Robotnik is standing before a SWAT bot, who's recording him on camera, as he announces himself. Robotnik is broadcasting in full colour on RBV, Robotnik Belly Vision, from the edge of the Great Forest as he marks yet another milestone of corruption. Yet he's interrupted by a voice off panel, suggesting they skip the speech and cut to the chase. Robotnik seems to recognise the voice, judging by his look of panic, and tries to yell Sonic's name, but is cut off with a cry of pain as he instead yells, "Son-yow!" Sonic speeds past and quips, "Not Son-yow, Tubbo, Sonic." There's another insulting name for those of you keeping track. 2 already this issue. Sonic mocks Robotnik, asking him if he's really expected Sonic to let him destroy the woods and build a toxic dump. But it seems that Robotnik had actually expected Sonic to turn up, despite seeming so shocked at his arrival. Robotnik now uses this opportunity to use a small flashlight and beam it into the sky, similar to the bat signal but with an outline closer to Robotnik's head, moustache and all. He'll use this flashlight to summon him to stop Sonic. Sonic stares up at the signal, wondering who him could be, and we're left wondering the same as we get ready to turn the page. I'll admit I was a little bit hoping we might finally be getting Metal Sonic, a favourite character of mine, but unfortunately it isn't. Instead we see Botman, and somehow it took me a moment for the Batman pun to hit me. I just thought, oh yeah, like a superhero but a bot, so Botman. Not sure why that didn't click with me at first. In fact, he even looks like a robotic Batman, with his horned cowl and cape, albeit in brown and yellow rather than black. Sonic repeats the name as "What man?" and Robotnik corrects him with a "Botman." All set up so Botman can say, "And I'm here to kick your butt, man." He gives Sonic a swift kick in the rear and sends him flying away with an "ouch" as Robotnik rubs his hand with glee and chuckles to himself in the background. Sonic clearly means business now as he's taking off his gloves, though there's still a glove on the floor and on both hands, so I'm not sure how many pairs he's wearing. I guess it's just a joke about the gloves are off now to get him some fighting words, because he keeps the gloves on in the next panels too. He charges at Botman, calling him an ex-factory reject, and speeds along at 250 miles per hour, only to bounce off the bot with a kadang as Botman suggests they see how fast Sonic goes in reverse. That is one heck of a robot. Not sure why Robotnik didn't build this sooner. Did he really need crab meat to come up with the idea to build a robot that could actually take on Sonic? With Sonic seemingly out for the count, Robotnik begins to direct his cameraman. First he should zoom in on Sonic quivering on the floor, then pan over to Robotnik as he snickers, before dollying left and pulling back to a wide shot with Botman. Turns out what Robotnik really wants to do is direct. Well, I suppose I'll have plenty of time for that when he's done conquering Mobius. Yet we find that Sonic was in fact playing possum and just waiting for a good opening. He leaps up to attack with a whang and yells, "Okay, Beavis and Butthead, let's see how you handle a Sonic spin." Botman isn't deterred, however, and warns Sonic that he'd better have brought his sleeping bag, because it's going to be a long night. The two clash in a series of sound effects. Sock, pow, biff, crunch, kablooey! Yet in the end, only Botman remains standing, and Sonic is on the floor. Botman's foot is on his chest, and his eyes are now little X's. It looks like Robotnik's finally defeated the Hedgehog. Robotnik brags about his victory to the camera, trusting that all the freedom fighters are watching it live, though perhaps Sonic isn't so live anymore. We find out that they are in fact watching as all this unfolds through a television screen, while Tails, Sally and Rota watch on in both shock and horror. With Sonic seemingly down and out, part 1 of the story ends. How will our heroes possibly get out of this one? Well, you don't need to wait long to find out, because as usual, part 2 starts immediately on the next page. One of the first things I noticed here is that Crabmeat is back, and I want to say that before I forget to mention it. Guess he isn't gone after all. I suppose it was a different Crabmeat that got crushed up to be used as spare parts. Robotnik is dancing with glee that Sonic is at last defeated, but Crabmeat noticed something strange. A large amount of robot parts on the floor. On closer inspection, Robotnik realises they look an awful lot like the parts used to build Botman. It's almost as if Botman has been gutted, and in response to the suggestion, Botman suddenly pipes up with, "You got it!" We discover both that Sonic is alive and well, and Botman is an empty shell, courtesy of a little rhyming duet there by Robotnik and Crabmeat. Sonic casts off the parts of Botman he was wearing, and there's something a little creepy and sinister about Sonic describing him as wearing the husk of Botman, but I suppose it doesn't matter too much now because it's all over. Robotnik starts losing his temper. huffing and puffing with a "Why, you!" as he trails off insults he's too angry to finish. Just to add insult to injury, Sonic's even holding his nose against Robotnik's breath here while he mocks him face to face. Strange to seem so confident after being terrified of Robotnik chasing him down before when they were hunting for Uncle Chuck's treasure, but I guess I'd be silly to expect that kind of solid continuity this early on in the series. Robotnik isn't done yet, though. He has all of Crabmeat's comic books to inspire him. He's already ordered a second superpowered robot from the factory, and we see a blue Robo-to-Go truck backing up with a classic eep, eep, eep noise as Robotnik beckons it closer to unveil his latest monstrosity. Crabmeat tries to interject here with a "Excuse me, your flabbiness." So there's another weight insult for those of you keeping track. Robotnik ignores his concerns, however, insisting that Sonic will marvel at his next robot. In case the reference to Marvel wasn't clear enough there, he also holds up a Wolverine comic book, showing a hairy arm with a clawed hand. Sonic seems genuinely concerned here, or at least I'm pretty sure he's supposed to. He's once again ends up drawn with a slightly too long nose that just throws off the whole face. He's still recognisable, but he looks way too funny and goofy to take his reaction seriously. The truck opens and the deadly robot reveals itself, and it's not quite what the Doctor ordered. Crabmeat finally explains, albeit far too late, that there has been a slight communications glitch. Instead of sending a Wolverine bot, they've sent a Wolverkle bot. Part Wolverine, but mostly Urkel from the TV series Family Matters. He's doing the Urkel dance as he strides down towards Sonic with a nerdy laugh, and is wearing huge oversized glasses. Robotnik yells out a "Oh no!" in horror at the mistake as Sonic bursts out laughing. That's another Robotnik rule broken, it seems, as both the robot and Sonic have started laughing now. Meanwhile, Sonic notices Urkel sounds oddly familiar, with a little editor's note to explain the joke to anyone that might not get it. Jaleel Urkel White is also the voice of Sonic in the cartoons. Also, Urkel here manages another laugh that's written as Snurkle. Not important, but I just wanted to draw attention to it because I thought it was funny. Robotnik decides his plan isn't working, and it isn't helping his image. Image. Just like the comic company, he realises. And that leads us into our next superpowered robot. Part anti-hero spawn, part lawnmower, it's the Spawn Mower. It's approaching rapidly, chopping down the great forest as Sonic yells, "Holy Toddlerdo!" which is a reference to Todd McFarlane, creator of Spawn. There sure are a lot of references in this issue. Sonic rushes over to stop the Spawn Mower. Unfortunately, he's noticed a glaring weakness. Spawn Mower stops every few panels to strike a pin-up pose. I assume that's a reference to how the old Spawn comics looks, but unfortunately I've not read them so I can't confirm it. This stopping to pose gives Sonic the opportunity to yank Spawn Mower's spark plug wire, causing him to stall, so Sonic can deal with him permanently. He pushes the stalled Spawn Mower along, past the slow lane, the fast lane, and eventually past the McFar lane. So again, another reference to Spawn's creator. Soon enough, as Sonic puts it, the character is really over the edge. As Sonic pushes him over a cliff named Robotnik Ridge, and Spawn Mower presumably plummets to his off-panel death. Robotnik pushes onward with his attacks, now moving on to Magbot. I don't know who this one's based on, admittedly. It appears to be a man with black hair, either steel or silver arms and legs, orange boots, a purple shirt dress thing, and a belt with an M on it. If you can work out who this is, please do email in or leave a comment. I'd love to know. Regardless of who he is, however, he's very quickly bested by Sonic in a series of sound effects. We move straight on to Robotnik's next superpowered robot, Captain Marbot, revived from the Golden Age. This one even yells, "Shazam!" which makes me think he might, quite possibly, be based on Shazam. Sonic easily takes him out too, and looks hungry here, describing his favourite snack as chili dogs with big red cheese. I guess the outfit looks a bit like that. That's all I can imagine the joke is meant to be here, unless this one just flew over my head. Finally, Robotnik is looking defeated and even gives a sigh as he lets out his final robot, Mighty Bot. This one's a tiny mouse, and is singing, "Here I come to spoil the day." I fear the fact I recognise this as a parody of Mighty Mouse is really showing my age. Once again, Sonic defeats him in a series of speedy sound effects, though admits it was one tough mouse and he just squeaked by. He looks pretty comfortable though, so I get the feeling it wasn't that tough at all. He just wanted an excuse to make a pun. Sonic is now standing atop a huge pile of destroyed robots, and he looks really angry now. He's beaten every one of those Superbots, and now he says it's time for Robotnik. Robotnik finally seems to realise the danger he's in and pleads for mercy. Sonic makes a quip about him not knowing he spoke French, only to slip on some oil and fall over. Robotnik takes the opportunity to escape, riding Crab Meat away with a "Hi-yo, Crab Meat!" and whipping him to make him go faster. Sonic is lying on the floor and groans as he realises he forgot the golden rule of superhero stories. The bad guy always gets away at the end. Our final panel of the story has us back in Knothole Village, with everyone celebrating Sonic's victory. Even Antoine looks impressed with him, despite their frequent disagreements. Rota also mentions that all the inside jokes are bound to make the story highly collectible, so I guess cramming in so many was on purpose. As Tails says, though, don't go bagging up the comics just yet, because there's still more to come. Our next page is a pin-up picture of Sonic at a bowling alley, complaining he left the 5 pin-up. Pun aside, that is unlucky, though I'm sure I've done the same at least once before, as impossible as it might seem to only miss the centremost pin and nothing else. In the background, Rota's holding his own bowling ball and looking on with a smug smile, which I like to think is the writer's insert here as they quietly bask in the warm glow of having put way more effort into that pun than was necessary, which in turn always inevitably makes them much funnier. Now we're straight on to another new story, this one titled A Little Sonic Goes a Long Way. This is part 1 too, so it looks like we've got 2 longer stories in this issue. Sonic is standing on a hill and playing a guitar before racing down, as Tails explains what's happening. Only Sonic could pull off the incredible feat of playing a note and then racing to Tails before the note reaches him. We even get to see a big musical note following after Sonic here. They talk a lot about him going at the speed of sound, but it seems he can even outrun it. As we pan out to see all the freedom fighters together, Tails mentions it's been a long time since he's heard a guitar, while Sally tells me it's because Robotnik banned all music. She looks pretty annoyed too. I mean, I get it, but don't take it out on Tails, come on now. Antoine assures them he can still sing and proceeds to do so. Very, very poorly. Bunny points out Robotnik only banned music though. I guess Antoine's singing just isn't good enough to count. Rota asks Sonic to play for them, and Sonic's only too happy to oblige. He plays his guitar and we follow a musical note travelling out of the Great Forest, through the air and into Robotropolis. It floats in through a window, and straight into the ear of, well, I'm sure you can guess who. The single note causes a deafening yell of anger from Robotnik, who claps his hands over his ears to block it out. We also see a new assistant to the comics appear here, assuming you don't count the Christmas Carol parody, that is. Sniffly has finally officially made it into the comics. He's carrying in a weird-looking piece of metal, and apologises for disturbing Robotnik while he was singing, clearly having misinterpreted the Doctor's annoyed yell at his attempt at singing. Robotnik seizes his assistant, and explains that it wasn't him singing. He heard a musical note and he hates music. He holds Snively out of the window so he can hear the sound of someone playing music, even after Robotnik's outlawed it. Snively stammers out a question as to who it could be, and Robotnik quickly guesses correctly. It's Sonic, because of course, who else would it ever be? He muses about how much he'd love to get his hands, or even a thumb, on the hateful hedgehog. Unfortunately, Snively has just the thing. It turns out the weird thing Snively was carrying earlier is a new device he's invented that will reduce things to a miniature size. The only problem is that it'll only last for an hour. There's plenty of time for Robotnik to catch a spoon-sized Sonic though, he says, and I thought it weird he's used spoon as the size comparison, but I suppose it is connected closely with the food, which does make sense for Robotnik. We find out Robotnik also has a large machine called the Freedom Fighter Finder, which will let him know if Sonic and friends venture beyond the Great Forest. I'm guessing it can't just narrow down the location of Knothole, unfortunately. What the machine can do, however, is give Robotnik 50 channels on the all-evil cable network. While he's explaining this, though, Snively is singing along to Sonic's earlier tune, which is definitely a huge mistake. It is breaking one of Robotnik's rules, after all. Robotnik turns on Snively and chases him down, determined to test the reducing device on him for his behaviour. We don't see him catch Snively, but given Robotnik's size, I can only assume Snively got away. At least for the moment. We move on to later that day, and Sonic is showing the team where he found his guitar, at the abandoned Mobius concert hall. Now they can grab enough instruments to form their own band. The most willing seems to be Bonnie, who asks to play the cymbals and the saxophone. It's an odd mix, and Rota questions why she wants to play those instruments. But we find out it was all her building up to a joke. It's because she's the sax symbol of the team. Nothing like a good bit of confidence, eh? And I don't suppose she's entirely wrong. They head on inside and discover the entire place is wrecked. Antoine talks about how it was once home to musical masterpieces, but Sally says it looks more like musical smashed to pieces. There's a couple of fun little things to notice here too. We have a picture on the wall of Wagner, who seems to be a dog Mobian, and in the foreground there's a sculpture of Bothoven, a bat badnik. Does this mean badniks used to be part of their world without being evil? Was Bothoven a real musician before the war with Robotnik? In that case, where did badniks come from? Of course, we won't be getting any answer to any of that, because it's just a throwaway sight gag. But it's interesting to think about all the same. On the next page, the whole gang is suddenly caught in a bright electrical light with a zap. Sonic's the first to start recovering as he wonders what happened after what felt like an electric shock, while the sinister outline of Robotnik explains that it was more like a short circuit. They've all been shrunk down thanks to Snively's device, and Robotnik isn't through yet. We find out he's riding his mobile bot on the Spotmaker, meaning that this machine has yet again had an improvement. He's really not letting this one go, is he? This iteration of the bot on the Spotmaker also has a huge vacuum, so he can suck up all the shrunken freedom fighters. They're all hanging on desperately to a rug, not wanting to be sucked in, with Sonic the only one far away enough to avoid the suction for the moment. As they all cry out in a panic, and Antoine's hair once again seemingly reveals itself as a toupee, Tails warns Sonic to save himself while he still can. With that dramatic cliffhanger, we end part 1 of the story. Of course, as is always the case, we go straight on to part 2, so you don't need to wait long to find out what happens next. As part 2 begins, we find Robotnik has decided the other freedom fighters can be ignored for now. Sonic is his primary target, and he's bearing down on the shrunken hedgehog in his giant machine with the vacuum cleaner trying to pull Sonic in. Fortunately, Sonic's retained his speed, so he manages to outspeed the Doctor, though being distracted by his impending vacuum-related doom, Sonic almost runs straight into a house-sized box. Luckily, he stops in time though, and uses his sonic spin to cut a hole through. Though at his current size, even a simple cardboard box feels as tough to cut as wood. It turns out the box was filled with concert programs, and as they spill out, they start to block up Robotnik's vacuum, giving Sonic and friends a chance to start running to safety. We get a nice shot of them all running in a line, giving a good look at the designs for all the freedom fighters, and soon enough they find themselves in a hiding place in a giant rug while Robotnik is busy cursing that they escaped, as he continues to vacuum up the entire concert hall. After all, if he sucks up everything, then he'll have to catch them eventually. While the freedom fighters are in hiding, Sonic rushes back out to challenge Robotnik alone. He taunts him and baits him with a "You missed a spot of dirt, time to clean up your act." And Robotnik grows even angrier as he starts chasing down the blue blur. Sonic's speed won't necessarily be enough now though, because he's shrunk down, and when Robotnik wants something, nothing will stop him. It turns out though that's precisely what Sonic was counting on. He lures Robotnik over towards the concert pit, and Robotnik foolishly follows him in, his machine tumbling down with a heavy crash as it gets wrecked. Sonic offers Robotnik a baton to conduct himself better, because I'm not sure this series will ever run out of puns, but Robotnik isn't beaten just yet. He whips out his handheld Robomaker, the Pest Buster, and invites Sonic to take a look at it from the inside as he turns it on. Sonic gets sucked up immediately, and Robotnik cackles in triumph. All he needs to do now is press the roboticization button, and Sonic is all his. Yet, just as he reaches over, the Pest Buster is knocked aside with a thunk, and he looks around in search of whoever's interrupting his moment of victory. We find out that it's in fact the other freedom fighters, who are finally getting a chance to pull their weight as they save Sonic from certain doom. Sally is near the top of a giant violin, or at least giant to them, and it's standing upright. Antoine is sitting on the body and guiding them, while Tails and Rota team up to load what looks like sharp blades into the strings to fire them off, like they're using a bow and arrow. And meanwhile, Bunny is standing at the bottom with more of those blades in hand. No idea where she got them from, but given her strength, I suppose she could have just broken something to get more ammunition. As they fire, Robotnik gets out a "Yow!" as he leaps into the air, narrowly avoiding being impaled, and ends up landing on his head somehow with a kabam! Seems like the rest of the freedom fighters are a force to be reckoned with when they work together. Infuriated by his failures, Robotnik declares he's going to smash those little, oh no. Looks like he forgot something very important. The shrinking effect only lasts for an hour, and it's already up, as the freedom fighters begin to grow to their normal size again and surround him. They're mostly just silhouettes but Sally looks especially angry. Guess they're not such little problems anymore, are they? Yet, with all the freedom fighters back to normal, there is one missing. Sonic still in the Pest Buster. Luckily, he breaks out as he returns to normal size, and he explains that he was fine because all of Robotnik's machines are just like him, cheap and rusty. Sonic orders Robotnik to stand down as he's outnumbered, and Rota points out they've nearly got him outweighed too. You know what? Good job, Rota. That was actually really well timed and a good insult. Sally offers to let Robotnik run, but he refuses, signalling his badniks to join him. Soon they'll all gather and defeat and capture the freedom fighters, and when he's done, he can make them destroy the concert hall themselves. Robotnik's laughing at his seemingly imminent victory, but Sonic won't let it happen. We see his silhouette aiming something at Robotnik, which, I suppose, is probably meant to look like a gun, as he announces, "Let him have it, guys!" The silhouette is pretty clearly a guitar, though. I'm not sure they could have got away with having Sonic shoot Robotnik during the comics. Everyone starts playing music to drive Robotnik away. Sonic on guitar, Bonnie on the trumpet, Rota on bass, Tails on trombone, Antoine playing piano, and Sally hammering a giant drum. The music convinces an angry and screaming Robotnik to retreat, which is all well and good, but the badniks are still on the way. Rota has, however, found the device that was used to shrink them, which gives Sonic a great idea. Our final panel of the story reveals what his plan was. Robotnik is sat in his office back in Robotropolis, cursing Sonic and having a tantrum that he lost yet again. He's surrounded by an awful lot of badniks too, though in this case they've all been shrunk down. He at least has the good sense to order Snively to get rid of them before they return to normal size and crush him in the room. He specifically wants them gone in short order. As Snively wails that he will do it shortly, master, shortly, because we of course still need to end on another bit of wordplay. With that, we come to the end of this issue. How did you enjoy this week's stories? Personally, I thought the superhero focus in the first half was a little bit overwhelming, but I enjoyed it anyway. And the second story I definitely liked, because it's great to see the rest of the freedom fighters do their part in the fight against Robotnik. I generally enjoy the little one-page mini-stories we sometimes get, but I don't miss them too much here given the quality of the larger stories we were given. How about you, though? Whatever your thoughts, feel free to leave a comment or send me an email at arcsoncompod@gmail.com. That's arcsoncompod@gmail.com. As people write in, I'll try and get some read out in other episodes. Next week we'll be moving on to issue 9. I know it seems silly I keep saying this and giving you the issue numbers, but trust me, it's going to get a lot more complicated further down the line. Thanks again for taking the time to listen as we revisit these comics together. Hopefully you'll tune in again next time, and until then, have a great week and take care of yourselves. Goodbye.